The Senate Committee on Natural Resources will now come to order as our friend Senator Orenshaw has joined us. Will the Secretary please call roll?
Senator Flores. Present. Senator Goycochea. Here. Senator Hansen. Here. Senator Pizzina. Present. Senator Scheibel. Here.
All right, we have all 5 members present, so we absolutely have a quorum. Before we begin, just a few reminders. Please silence your cell phones and electronic devices, otherwise a member of the staff may start taking all of your phone calls. The public is advised that during meetings, legislators and staff are using laptops to view bills and exhibits and not for personal reasons. We're trying to be as paper-free as possible. Please do not look at this as a sign of inattention or disrespect. Please note that we require everyone to submit exhibits in an electronic format the day before the meeting. A few reminders about testifying before the committee. We ask that you do sign in at the table by the door. Please give the committee secretary your business card if you have one prior to testifying. Even if you're not testifying, you may want to sign in so that there is a record of who's interested in a particular bill in case the committee would like to contact you at a later date. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state and spell your name, and share your affiliation, if any, for the record. Then please turn the microphone off each time that you've completed speaking. If you have handouts for the committee, we ask that you provide 10 hard copies to the committee secretary for use by the public. We will be taking public comment at the end of each meeting, and a reminder that that public comment should not have anything to do with any of the bills that we're discussing here today, though we look forward to hearing your testimony during those bills. We'll be limiting public comment to 2 minutes per person to ensure that everyone gets an opportunity to speak. Please feel free to provide any additional comments in writing to the committee secretary, and they will be added to the record. Today, we're going to be hearing 2 bills. We're going to start with Senate Joint Resolution 4, and then we'll be hearing Senate Bill 258. And with that said, we'd like to welcome our presenters, and we'll now open the hearing on Senate Joint Resolution 4.
Good afternoon, Chair Pizzina, members of the Senate Committee on Natural Resources. For the record, my name is James Orenshaw. I represent State Senate District 21 down in Southern Nevada. Thank you for hearing Senate Joint Resolution 4. To my left is a good longtime friend, former classmate at UNLV Boyd Law School, Michael DeLee, who came to me with this idea about alternative uses for what has really been just something I know I've grown up with, growing up here in Nevada, the threat of the storage of high-level radioactive waste at the Yucca Mountain site. As we are all aware, the future of the Yucca Mountain project, originally designated for the permanent storage of high-level radioactive waste and its potential uses, is uncertain. Since 1983, the Department of Energy has spent billions of dollars to evaluate the Yucca Mountain site for potential use as a nuclear waste repository for high-level radioactive waste. As we're all aware, our state has vigorously and vehemently opposed the use of this site as a repository for the nation's high-level radioactive waste and spent nuclear fuel due to the extremely dangerous nature of this waste, the potential harm to our environment, the serious and unacceptable hazard to the health and welfare of our constituents. In 2021, a U.S. Government Accountability Office report included statements indicating that the federal government now acknowledges that Yucca Mountain is not suitable as the nation's repository for high-level radioactive waste. That report found that Yucca Mountain is not a socially or politically viable option for a repository because Congress stopped funding for the activities for the repository in 2010. And the state of Nevada and several Native American tribes are strongly opposed to the siting of a high-level radioactive waste repository there for our country's spent nuclear fuel. That report also explained that Yucca Mountain is no longer a sufficient site for our country's high-level radioactive waste because the existing amount of spent nuclear fuel exceeds the capacity that Yucca Mountain was even projected to have. Additionally, last year, President Biden's administration announced its opposition to using Yucca Mountain as the nation's repository for high-level radioactive waste, and instead stated that there were plans to send nuclear waste to the places where state, local, and tribal governments can agree that they would be willing to accept it. Finally, during a visit last year, Jennifer Granholm, the current Secretary of the U.S. Department of Energy, stated that Yucca Mountain will not be a storage place for nuclear waste under her directorship of the Department of Energy. I believe now it's eminently clear that Yucca Mountain will not be our nation's high-level radioactive waste storage site. The question has become what alternative uses could take advantage of Yucca Mountain's unique characteristics. This question was addressed by the U.S. Government Accountability Office in 2011 in a report identifying alternative uses for Yucca Mountain, which included the development of renewable energy. Experts at that time noted that the site could be used to develop geothermal energy, solar energy, wind energy, carbon capture, compressed air storage, hydroelectric energy storage, or a renewable energy storage laboratory. The benefits of renewable energy are well known to the members of this committee, and this resolution simply urges the federal government to look at the Yucca Mountain site for the development and storage of renewable energy and any alternative uses. And certainly, I think all of us are aware we had UNLV Day earlier this week. We've got an outstanding research university 90 miles away from the site. I think there are plenty of possibilities where that site could be used for science, for technology, for renewable energy. And the added benefit, if that were to happen, for our state and our fight against the storage of high-level radioactive waste, is that if those uses are being used there, I think it becomes an even less attractive site for the storage of high-level radioactive waste should a new administration or new leadership in Congress suddenly look at Yucca Mountain again as what they believe would be the solution to our country's storage of nuclear waste problem. With that, with your indulgence, Chair, I wonder if I could turn it over to Mr. DeLee, who really helped me come up with this idea and lives very close to Yucca Mountain in Amargosa Valley, Nevada.
Please, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Michael DeLee, D-E-L-E-E. I just want to be clear that this idea didn't start with me, that it's been studied many times, and it's really the people of Amargosa Valley, where I live, and the people that are joining us today. This is the product of people looking at what we can do to improve the quality of life in the local community and to build something for our families, for our future, and be proud of it all the way around. It makes sense. We've got maybe a little too much solar right now headed for Amargosa Valley. We're working on that. That's some of the bills. But we've got a lot of potential for research in how to store that energy, and maybe a lot of technologies that haven't been invented yet. And they need an incubation space. They need development space. They need things that, well, frankly, government probably needs to be involved to make sure those things happen. Kind of like what they were thinking about Yucca Mountain in the first place. It's probably the most geologically and hydrologically studied place on Earth. We know very well what that site is all about, and I think it's pretty suitable for this use. We're going to have two very large power lines, if plans go forward, go right by the facility. So it makes a lot of sense, and we hope that you can consider it and hear from others that are also in favor of the proposal.
Thank you, Chair Brazina. I'm happy to answer any questions you or the committee may have.
Thank you so much. Any questions from the committee on Senate Joint Resolution 4? Senator Hansen.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. This is a very complicated issue, not the concept of actually asking Congress to come up with a new use, but the energy issue itself. If we're going to go electric, we have to produce a heck of a lot more electricity. We don't harness lightning. Now, I've read some of Patrick's articles and some of the Sierra Club stuff, and nobody likes wind. Solar is the 20-year life expectancy for the panels. Then when they wear out, they're full of all sorts of nasty stuff. Currently, we have some place in North Dakota where we're burying the panels, or we're shipping them to China where they have poor people taking them apart to recycle some of the stuff, but they're exposed to all sorts of nasty things that are in those panels. I'm just wondering have you guys considered possibly taking the current nuclear waste site potentially at Yucca as a place to store old solar panels? We are having, in the next 20 or 30 years, we're going to have hundreds of thousands of those. We don't recycle them. They're getting buried in the ground. Have you considered possibly using this instead of storing energy? What are you going to do with the old panels from the green energy projects as they age?
James Ornschall, State Senate District 21, to you and through you, Chair, to Senator Hansen.
Please
Just-
go direct and thank you.
Thank you. Just want to correct him one thing about nobody likes wind. I like wind. Remember, I think it was the 2013 session, I had a bill to try to not allow the prohibition of windmills to generate electric power. Unfortunately, that didn't make it through to the governor's desk, but I do like wind. As to the answer on the solar panels.
Well, you're in the right place.
Yeah, I have a lot of it, a lot of hot air. I know you, Senator Hansen, but as to the solar panels,
Well,
don't have an answer to that.
I just want to throw that out there. The wind thing, honestly, it's been quite interesting reading some articles in the Sierra Club publications and stuff. Apparently, there are literally millions of birds because they put the wind things in these wind areas that migratory birds have used for who knows how long, and insects. There's been like literally millions and billions of them being killed by these wind things. So that's why I'm bringing up the idea. Plus, frankly, they're exceptionally unsightly to me. There's some areas, you go to Spring Valley, Nevada, where they've got those big, they look like some kind of weird monstrosity from who knows where. Anyway, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent. The one thing I do worry about, having read Michael Schallenberger's book, Apocalypse Never, and he points out that what we're going to have to do in the future in America, if we want to have a green revolution, is we're going to have to produce more nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is the only one that actually has zero carbon footprint. And in the future, right now, all that nuclear waste that we're talking about that's so horribly dangerous is being stored in areas with giant populations, major population centers, especially back east where they're using nuclear power now. The other issue is, in theory, because we lost the Sagebrush Rebellion, we share the public domain in Nevada with 330 million other Americans. So if we actually had control of the lands, public lands within our borders, then yes, we could say, hell no, we don't want your nuclear waste. If you produce it somewhere else, you guys get to store it. But it's their public domain as much as ours. So while I as a Nevadan, certainly don't want that, we don't own the land. It's like us telling everybody in the rest of the United States they can't use their own public domain. So I am worried about it because while I'm glad we're protecting Nevadans, the entire amount of waste is building up in high population areas in the United States. We're endangering those people by not coming up with a good spot. I do know New Mexico has some kind of a spot where their government wanted it. So there is some possibilities, but we got to recognize at some point we got to generate a heck of a lot more energy, electric energy, in order to meet the demands that we want with a whole green energy revolution.
Senator, was there a question in the end?
Do you agree with that? I've learned from the lawyers on judiciary.
James Ornschall, Senate 21, to Senator Hansen through Chair Pazina. Certainly, I think back to the resolution Senator Brooks sponsored opposing Yucca Mountain, and I remember testimony about the dangers of transporting the high-level radioactive waste across the country, not just dangers to our constituents in Nevada, but dangers when those trains go through cities across the country with those barrels. And, the hope was that those barrels would be tamper-proof and resistant to any breakage, but I still have concerns about that. We heard testimony when Senator Brooks had his resolution on the water table levels at Yucca Mountain, on the seismic activity, and dangers that, not just because we don't want it, but dangers that scientifically make it unsuitable. And I think that what we're hearing from the federal government now is that if there are areas that are open to that, then that's where it should be cited, not in an area where there's been very, very strong opposition like here in Nevada.
Well, I agree. I'm not against your resolution, so just so you know, but I just think as we discuss these issues going forward, we got to look at, realize that there are some enormous decisions that have to be made in this country about not only nuclear waste, but where we're going to get the electricity from. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Senator. Any other questions? Senator Gokachia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a couple of brief questions. That's still withdrawn, Yucca Mountain. It's part of the test site. So again, it's not public access. Or in this resolution, are you going to ask that it actually be removed or moved outside, or are you going to maintain it as part of the test site? That does, some problems in transporting these materials you're talking about.
Well, through you, Chair Pazina, to Senator Gokachia, James Ornschall, State Senate
Please
District.
go direct.
Oh, thank you. State Senate District 21. My hope is that if our congressional delegation listens to Senate Joint Resolution 4, and if it passes, then we'll be looking at alternative uses for the Yucca Mountain site, whether it's science, technology, development of renewable energy, energy storage, and whether it would remain part of the test site or a different designation by the federal government, that I would have to leave up to the congressional delegation. But my hope is that we'll never see transport of high-level radioactive waste to the Yucca Mountain.
Well, thank you. And I don't know, did you ever take the train ride through Yucca? I've been there.
Senator, no, I haven't.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any further questions from the committee, so if you'd like, you can take a step back from the table, and we will ask those testifying in support of Senate Joint Resolution 4 to please come forward here in Carson City and Las Vegas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Patrick Donnelly with the Center for Biological Diversity. We support this resolution. Yucca Mountain is extremely problematic for a number of reasons that have been discussed in this building many times over the years. I think the idea of turning it into a renewable energy facility, it is Department of Energy that manages that land, so theoretically it would be synergistic with their mission. Why has Nye County been supportive of Yucca Mountain? Not because they want the nuclear waste, because they want the economic activity. They want the economic benefit. They don't want to be the nation's nuclear waste dumpster. They just want the economic benefit. And so, citing renewable energy there, using that $1 billion hole in the ground for something more than just a hole in the ground, would give that economic benefit to the local rural communities, but also prevent that site from being used for nuclear waste, because it really is an inappropriate site hydrologically, geologically. There are a number of issues, and Senator Hansen would love to have a discussion about transportation of nuclear waste and those issues, because I think there's fertile room for discussion there, as well as the consent-based siting issue. But at any rate, I think this is the right approach to deal with Yucca Mountain, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, please come forward. We do have 3 seats at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Jay Dixon, Jaydixon. I'm testifying in support of this resolution. I do want to say that I've waited 26 years to make this statement. I came to Nevada in 1997, and I'm a product of the funds that were sent to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, as a result of Yucca Mountain. I got a master's degree doing hydrologic research on that project, and I happen to know from a purely hydrologic scientific perspective, it is the safest place in the world to store nuclear waste. There is no doubt about that, and that's based on the best available science. But that's not what this bill's about. And since we have made a decision in this state to forego the tremendous economic benefits of storing waste there, the next best thing, I guess, is using it as a renewable energy research facility, and hopefully UNLV will benefit from that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much. Mark Fiorentino with the law firm of Camphor Crowell. We actually represent Nye County, and we are here to support the bill. I'm actually breaking my record of not having to testify yet this session, but we promised Senator Ornschall that we would support the bill. It's a good idea given the status of where we are and the various different alternatives. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions. Thank you so much, and we're happy we got to see you nearly 2 months in Natural Resources. All right, do we have anyone else here in Carson City to testify in support of Senate Joint Resolution 4? Or it doesn't look like anyone's coming to the table in Las Vegas. BPS, is there anyone over the phones?
If you would like to testify in support of SJR 4, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Paula Luna, Operations Manager with Battleborn Progress. We are calling in support of SJR4. We believe using this site for renewable energy can help us reach both economic and environmental goals without the risk posed by nuclear waste storage. We urge this committee support. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Luna. And I see someone has come to the table in Las Vegas, so we will move down to Las Vegas.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Carolyn Allen, A-L-L-E-N. I'm a resident of Amargosa Valley and also the Amargosa Valley Town Board Chair. I'm testifying in support of SJR4. We are currently being reshaped, or the attempt to be reshaped by solar, and the lines and the storage has to go somewhere. Yucca Mountain has been on the books for us for many, many years, and it has been fought a good hard fight, and I'm glad to see that they're not going to be storing nuclear waste. We have the opportunity to turn it into something very lucrative economically, not just economically, but for the town of Amargosa Valley, which is that's where it is located, is in Amargosa Valley. It can bring research, it can bring new people that want to live there and raise families there. And it's an excellent, I love this bill because it's actually bringing up what Amargosa Valley needs with all of this coming through. We are in what they call the sweet spot for Greenlink and all of the transmission lines and such. Currently, our town has 15 solar proposals, and they are going in and amongst our buildings and so on and so forth. So we're fighting that, but we need somewhere to put this, and I think this is an excellent bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas or in Carson City who'd like to testify in support of Senate Joint Resolution 4? BPS, can you also check the phones again for us?
If you would like to testify in support of SJR4, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Hello?
Please proceed if you're here to testify in support of Senate Joint Resolution 4. Thank you.
I'm sorry about that. My name is Sarah Rivers, and I am a member of the Town Board of Amargosa Valley, and it is a beautiful town out here, and it is nice to hear on this resolution that they're willing to try and do something more productive versus negative, because there are a lot of people out here that have gone through downwinder syndrome, and so there are a lot of negativities when it comes to nuclear and that type of spent radiation that's gone through there. So I am very much in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling in. BPS, is there anyone else over the phones to testify in support of SJR 4?
Public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. With that, we will open the opportunity for anyone to testify in opposition of SJR 4 here in Carson City or in Las Vegas. Please come forward.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Dylan Keith, D-Y-L-A-N, K-E-I-T-H, with the Vegas Chamber. We thank the sponsor for his intent on bringing this bill forward. We do agree that we want advancement and research in this sector to happen in Nevada, and we fully support renewable energy research and development. However, the Chamber has had a long-standing opposition to any development with the Yucca Mountain project, and we stand by that decision. For that reason, we urge your opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in Carson City or in Las Vegas to testify in opposition of SJR 4? BPS, would you mind checking the phone lines for us?
If you would like to testify in opposition to SJR 4, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. Would anyone here in Carson City or Las Vegas like to testify in neutral to Senate Joint Resolution 4? If so, please come forward to the tables. And BPS, if you'd also check the phone for us to see if there's anyone who'd like to testify in neutral on SJR 4.
If you would like to testify in neutral to SJR 4, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Jana Moan, Jainamoan, and we are testifying in neutral for Senate Joint Resolution 4. With a program called Mining the Sun, the Nature Conservancy strives to make it easier to site renewable energy on minelands, brownfields, and other disturbed spaces. The Conservancy recently calculated that in Nevada, these lands have the potential to generate 4.6 gigawatts of electricity that could avoid conversion of 396,000 acres of open space for energy development. Yucca Mountain could be an excellent location for a Mining the Sun site. We are mostly supportive of this resolution and the renewable energy and storage technologies noted, but we would be concerned about the use of the site for a strategic petroleum reserve as noted in the resolution. We hope to work with the bill proponent about this concern so we can get to a position of support. Thank you to Senator Orenshaw and the bill proponents for bringing this forward, and thank you for the opportunity to comment in neutral.
Thank you so much. BPS, anyone else over the phones?
There are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
All right. Senator, would you like to come back to make a closing statement?
Chair Pazina, members of the committee, I just think back to about 10 years ago when it looked like Yucca Mountain was going to be, maybe it's a little longer, but when it looked like it was on track to be the high-level radioactive waste repository for the nation. And there was an article in the Review Journal where they weren't sure how people in 500 or 1,000 years, how they'd warn people. And they took a picture of that painting, the Scream, and they were going to post that around there just to let people know this was an extremely dangerous place to get away from there. And I'm thinking of what a scary future Yucca Mountain had just a decade ago. And now we have the potential to look at science, renewable energy, so many alternative positive uses. And if these positive uses happen, then I think it becomes exponentially less likely that the federal government will be able to say, no, we need to take all the nation's high-level radioactive waste and spent nuclear fuel, transport it across the country, and send it here to Yucca Mountain, which I think puts not only our constituents in danger, but citizens around the country. So I hope the body will consider this, and I appreciate your time. Thank you for hearing it.
Did you have a closing statement, Mr. DeLee?
Chair, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll close the hearing on Senate Joint Resolution 4, and we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 258, revising provisions relating to water. And it looks like you're already seated here, so that's quite helpful.
Thank you very much, Chair Pazina and members of the committee. I'm still James Orenshaw, represent State Senate District 21 down in Southern Nevada. Thank you very much for hearing Senate Bill 258. I would like to direct the committee to an amendment that should be on Nellis because the amendment it changes much of what's in the original bill, and I'd like the committee and chair to consider that amendment. In summary, Senate Bill 258, with the proposed amendment, should your committee decide to adopt it, would authorize the state engineer in a designated basin to allow the drilling of a conservation domestic well, which would be limited to a withdrawal of half of an acre-foot per year, instead of a regular domestic well, which is allowed to withdraw up to 2 acre-feet per year. Senate Bill 258 also provides that the state engineer may grant a permit for a temporary change of the place of diversion, manner of use, or place of use of water already appropriated for a period not to exceed 5 years under certain circumstances, instead of 1 year as is currently allowed. I'd like to walk the committee through the substantive sections of the bill. Sections 1 and 2 provide that the term domestic well would include a new term, a conservation domestic well. Section 4 authorizes the state engineer to approve an application for a temporary change of the place of diversion, manner of use, or the place of use of water already appropriated for a period not to exceed 5 years, and requires that the state engineer give notice of the application. If the state engineer determines that the temporary change may not be in the public interest or may impair the water rights held by other persons, or if the temporary change is for a period of more than 1 year. Section 7 defines conservation domestic well as a well that is drilled for the development and use of groundwater for domestic purposes, where the draft does not exceed a half-acre foot per year. Section 9 allows the state engineer to authorize the drilling of a conservation domestic well and requires the owner of a conservation domestic well to install a water meter, ensure the withdrawal of the well does not exceed a half-acre foot in a calendar year, and file a report annually with the state engineer on the total withdrawal from the well during the immediately preceding calendar year. Chair, members of the committee, this is a bill idea I've been working on with Mr. DeLee, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And if they're very tough questions where I might get wet, I might turn them over to Mr. DeLee. Thank you.
All right, committee, do we have any questions? Senator Scheibel.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. So I'm assuming that right now the state engineer has not approved any of these conservation domestic wells, correct?
May I go direct, Chair? Thank you. Senator Scheibel, I don't believe they exist in statute now. This is an idea that I tried this idea of a conservation domestic well prior sessions, and this is another one like my wind bill that did not make it through to the governor's desk. So I don't believe that it doesn't exist in statute. I don't think the state engineer has anything like this. And please correct me if I'm wrong, Michael.
To Senator Scheibel, Michael DeLee for the record, DELEE. There's some recent changes to the statute that I think might allow a domestic well to be pared back under certain dire circumstances to half an acre foot, but that's, I believe, the closest thing. And what this is trying to do is offer another tool in the toolbox. We're not saying how to use it, when to use it, but it's another tool the state engineer can use going forward in managing our scarce water resources in the state. It's not telling anybody what you can and can't have. We're not touching domestic wells at all. So there's nothing we can do now, but with the passage of this bill, it's one more tool that the state engineer has to use in consultation with local governments about when it's appropriate.
And are you already aware of places, projects that would be seeking this remedy?
At this time, it probably has some discussion at different places around the state where there's a considerable stress on the aquifer, but there's no plans to use it in place because it's something that's been talked about for a decade, but we don't have the tool. So at this point, it's not part of what they have. We're hoping to get it there and then fine tune it through the adoption of regulations. The state engineer's office has become pretty good lately about going through a formal notice and hearing process for adopting regulations. I'm glad to see that. So I'm hoping that that is going to be part of a rulemaking process where they're going to adopt this in consultation with counties where it's appropriate, given the ability to do that.
Thank you. And I think you hit on what I was getting at in your last comment, saying that this has been discussed for the past decade. And so I was hoping that you could kind of give the committee a little bit of context about what those conversations have been like, you know, what were the instances in which having this conservation well would have been useful, and because we don't have them right now in statute, something else had to be done.
So it's hard to think of what you could have done, or the counterfactual example, but in the fact that they had spoken in favor of it in past sessions indicates that they were willing to use it and apply it, and we can think of places around the state where there's a lot of domestic wells and where they've been pared back, and now there's requirements on the books to go buy water rights, or just they're going to be banned altogether, which has really affected a lot of people and their expectations when they had maybe bought their property for retirement and so forth, and that made it to the Supreme Court of Nevada, and unfortunately the local folks lost that one. So it really just caught a lot of people off guard. And had this been available, maybe that could have been an alternative. Instead of fighting that battle, having clear winners and losers, there might have been a compromise. This could have been used under that scenario. It wasn't there. Hopefully that will avoid another similar catastrophe by more carefully managing the resource.
Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question's on the second part of the thing, really, temporary change. Currently, it's 1 year. You guys want to go 1 to 5. We discussed a little bit earlier, typically if it's a solar energy project, is what you're describing, quite a bit of use during the construction window, but a construction window shouldn't last 5 years, should it?
If I go direct to Senator Hansen, the projects that are out there are pretty big. I don't know that it's going to be 5 years, but there's certainly going to be more than one. So it crosses the current limitation for a renewable energy project, which is going to look at, well, if you can't get it done in 1 year, how can you be guaranteed that you're going to have access to that water resource so that you can get the financing, which might come from Wall Street or who knows where, and they need to see that all that is there, all the permitting is there, dust control, especially water rights for construction. It's really not needed for operations. We're talking about construction. If they don't get that, well, then you really can't do the project. In fact, one of the things that we did in Nevada to try to stop Yucca Mountain, to step back a moment, was to try to stop the water for Yucca Mountain. So that tool's been out there. So we want to make sure that's available for that specific need and for some of these projects that, because of their size, are going to go past the statutory 1 year time frame. But we don't want to open up the whole can of worms. We know a very specific use for it, and there are other specific uses in the water law, and we're just following that precedent.
Okay, I don't see anybody from the state engineer's office here. I have a question on that too. So I'm a little surprised they're not here today. I don't know. It's something like with temporary water, the criteria for it significantly different than permanent water. But if in a 5 year window, couldn't that potentially affect other people who have legitimate use of the water? Because temporary is supposed to be just that, and that means it's being taken away possibly from somebody else in a basin in that window of time. Their usage of it, I should say.
Precisely. To address that,
Please do share your name again for the
I'm
record.
sorry.
Thank you so much.
Michael DeLee, for the record. To address that concern, each of these applications would follow the laws for water rights change application, notice, protest period, et cetera. So it's not a temporary 1 year or less. This is a special window for renewable energy projects where they would have a protest potentially from anybody that's affected. The key here is that the water automatically returns back to its source once that construction project is done, up to a maximum of 5 years. And that's a tool we don't have right now. We have the ability to do a change application and say, we'll move the water from point A to point B, but then in order to get it back after, say, 2 years or 3 years, you have to do another change application and move it back. And we have absolutely seen instances where you can't do that because somewhere along the administrative law changed. An order came out and says you can't move it east. Well, you moved it west, now it's stuck. And that's a big risk that you're asking people to take that might be supplying that water. This does away with that. And it was a very wise person that suggested this about a year ago in Amargosa Valley. He's actually an attorney up here in Reno. And we've finally brought it under these wordings here.
Well, it makes sense. My only concern is that the people who, because with temporary water, people often go without a little bit for a window of up to a year maximum. So here we're taking it away from some folks. Question is, does the state engineer still have the ability to say no? I mean, or is it automatically granted 1 to 5? If you're going to do an energy project like you're describing, does the state engineer have, does he have the ability to almost veto that to protect other people's water rights or water usage? Or is it 1 or 5? That's kind of my question is, what about the other people in that same basin who may temporarily, normally for a construction project, lose a little bit of their water, but here you got a 5 year window. That seems significantly different.
Thank you, Michael Lee, for the record. And that's why we want this to follow all of the traditional notice periods, publication periods, protest if they may be, because if there are people that are going to be impacted by these changes, even though they're longer than 1 but less than 5, that needs to be out there, evaluated by the state engineer. If the state engineer makes a decision that people don't like, the appeal provisions are there to go to what is, I think, still going to be district court, although that's up for debate, I think. That's all there. We want to have those discussions both for the move to the project and for the move back. so that it's all settled, and then the project begins, and the people that are providing the water know that it's going to be returning, and the people that are affected get to address their concerns, and if their concerns are valid, then the project's not going to happen.
Very good. Thanks, Madam Chair.
And Chair, if I could just jump in, James Orangel, Senate 21. I just wanted to point Senator Hansen to the language in the amendment there in the amended section 4 sub 5 says a temporary change may be granted, not shall. So I think there'd still be that robust review process through the state engineers and the right to protest, right to appeal that decision.
I believe we do have some more questions from the committee, but would you like to run through the amendment, maybe item by item as well, just to ensure that we're all familiarized with it?
With your permission, Chair, actually, if I can pass that over to Mr. DeLee. Again, I don't want to get wet on this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael DeLee. The amendment is on Section 4 on page 3 of SB 258. It is adding the language that the renewable energy generation project is for a period of more than 1 year. That's under 3B. And under 4 is Section 5A, that it specifies that the temporary change may be granted for any period not to exceed, under A, 1 year, or B, and this is the new language, 5 years, if the temporary change is for a renewable energy project. And then 6 defines, as used in this section, a renewable energy generation project has the meaning ascribed to it, NRS 701.080.
Thank you so much. Senator Goicoechea, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just a couple. It's a little bit confusing because we've got a temporary change and then conservation wells. Conservation wells clearly don't require a water right. But again, if you're talking about temporary change, you are talking transferring water rights, changing them. And I'll be honest with you, I've never been a fan of long-term temporaries because 5 years, there's nothing that stops you at the end of 5 years from making the application again, and all of a sudden 5 becomes 20, and we've seen that happen. I'm in favor of staying on top of your paperwork. The more often you have to renew them, the less chance there is for someone to get impacted by a use, and that's just my own personal feelings. But the domestic, the conservation wells, and then of course we had and I don't remember, I didn't pull up the NRS, but Assemblywoman Swank brought that, technically the duty on a domestic well, even if it's curtailed in a critical management area, is the same duty, a half-acre foot. And I believe the state engineer can also require a meter. So I guess I'm struggling to find out the difference between your termination conservation well and what you would get issued with a domestic well if you were in fact facing curtailment in a critical management area. I don't know if you figure out what I'm asking in my rambling. Thanks.
No, thank you. And if I may go direct, Michael DeLee to Senator Goicoechea. The conservation domestic well proposal has actually been around for a long time, as we mentioned earlier, and the curtailment is relatively new. It does see the same level, but its application is very narrow in critical management areas. If we could try to, through planning, to get ahead of that and figure out what we can have in the way of alternatives so that people know going in, this is an option, and they could choose that option, not be forced to, but give it an option, and be ready for that so that if there is a curtailment, well, they're already ahead of that. They planned around it, they're living their life around it, they know what to expect. So it's just another tool in the toolbox. We don't want to make choices for people, we want to make options for people.
And then one more question, if I may. Again, it might be more for legal counsel, but just in the bill in a couple of places, but it says within an area that has been designated as a groundwater basin. Technically, that almost implies that it is a designated basin. But if that's the case, then it is subject to assessments, and it's one of the 90 to 100 basins across the state that is designated. Is that your intent, or are you only, is that just, that verbiage just there to say it could be any basin? I believe Armagosa is a designated basin, but there are a number of them in the state that aren't. So I was just some wordsmithing there. We've been playing with this all afternoon, wordsmithing on these water bills. But the way that's written, it sounds like this could only be used, or the state engineer it is in a designated groundwater basin, and I'm not sure that's what you intended.
For the record, Michael DeLee to Senator Goitia. It actually is, and maybe it's not clear there, but it is for designated basins, so it is in a basin that's designated. That does represent a good number of basins, not all of them. The ones that are not designated have typically very, very little use in there, so not really on the radar screen for anything that is going to be concerning having to see a curtailment in the near future.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure you intended that because it wouldn't be a tool that you could use in the majority of the basins. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the committee? Okay. Seeing none, if you'd like to step back from the table, we will plan on getting testimony in support of Senate Bill 258. If you'd like to support, please step up to the table here in Carson City or in Las Vegas. BPS, is there anyone on the phones who'd like to testify in support of Senate Bill 258?
If you would like to testify in support of SB 258, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. One last call. Anyone in support of SB 258, either here in Carson City or down south in Las Vegas? All right, seeing no one approaching, we're going to open testimony for those in opposition of Senate Bill 258, both here in Carson City as well as in Las Vegas.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and Committee. For the record, my name is Steve Walker. I'm representing Eureka County. Eureka County is in opposition to SB 258. The bill doesn't recognize the role of counties to require water rights on new parcels that would use the conservation domestic well. Additionally, parcel size is very important when allowing domestic wells/septic systems. In most cases, 1 acre parcels served by domestic wells, septic systems have created groundwater contamination by nitrates. 0.5 acre feet doesn't address this issue since indoor water use will go to the same place. No water right dedication on new parcels in the state that's the driest in the union is bad water policy. There's a court case, Serpa versus Washoe County, that ruled that counties can require water right dedication above the demand to address over-allocation of water rights and over-pumping. You're in a dedicated basin that needs to make sure you have a balance of water rights and water use, and yet there's no requirement for water rights. That's a problem. We also see that there's an unnecessary administration burden on the state engineer. Typically, a domestic well, when you assess water resource use, uses an acre foot. And it's not the 2. So that's another issue. As far as the other part of the bill, Eureka County is in support of the 5-year extension on temporary rights. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Kyle Rorank with the Great Basin Water Network. I want to echo the comments of Mr. Walker on conservation wells. We're opposed to the bill for those reasons. And we are also opposed to the temporary change application provisions as well. I think when you look at the statute, you don't have to notice things as you would in a newspaper for a temporary change application like you would for new water rights. And I think it speaks to some of what you were getting at, and Senator Goicoechea with, we're just having serial temporaries filed without the same noticing requirements as a regular change application or a regular filing for water rights. So that's something that we're concerned about because it could impact due process rights of other water users. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Patrick Donnelly with the Center for Biological Diversity. With regard to the we are opposed to this bill. With regard to the conservation well provisions, generally agree with the previous testimony about the issues with that concept of the conservation well and the lack of dedication of water rights and other issues with that matter. With regard to the temporary applications, I think right now we have a broken temporary application system, and this would not fix it. It would just carve out one industry that would be targeted, and so it really wouldn't address the problem, the broader problem with the temporary application system and these serial temporaries and semi-permanent temporaries. This would bypass all that, and so rather than trying to make an exemption for one industry, it seems like we just need to fix that system. So because this bill doesn't really accomplish the aims of promoting more conservation of groundwater resources in this state, we do oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Donnelly. Do we have anyone else here in Carson City or Las Vegas who would like to testify in opposition of Senate Bill 258? BPS, anyone over the phones?
If you would like to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 258, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller 923, please press star 6 to unmute. Caller, go ahead. Continue.
Thank you, Chairwoman Pazina, members of the committee. My name is Robert Kochi. I'm representing Tingatse Peak Services, a wholly owned subsidiary of Lion Copper and Gold, and 3PL Operating Inc. My clients originally supported SB 258 as initially submitted. Unfortunately, my clients have to oppose 258 as amended as a result of SB 258 now being industry specific to solar with regards to the temporary change portion. Mining industry files more temporary applications that change with the state engineer than any industry in the state. These temporary change applications are limited to 1 year under the existing statute, and nothing in SB 258 as initially submitted changes or limits the ability of the water rights holder to continue filing serial 1 year temporary change applications. For my clients, SB 258 as initially submitted would have been beneficial from a planning, timing, and human resource perspective. It also would have allowed these temporary change applications for more than 1 year to go through the publication process of changing existing water rights and be transparent to all entities, including NGOs. How this would have benefited one of my clients, for instance, is that the Tingatse Peak Services ERT mine project, they are currently in the planning stages of a 2 to 3 year mine pit dewatering project. SB 258 as initially submitted would have allowed Tingatse Peak Services to develop a multi-year conjunctive management plan to use the pit dewater as replacement groundwater in Mason Valley. My last point is this: of the 23 water-related BDRs this legislative session, AB 258 as initially submitted is the only bill that actually reduces the state engineer's workload resulting from the serial filing of 1 year temporary change applications that do not go through the public review period, public publication period for protest. With that, thank you, Chairwoman, again, and have a good day.
Thank you. BPS, anyone else on the phones in opposition of Senate Bill 258?
Yes,
Yes, this is Matthew Berg. I am the chair of the Well Owners Association in Nye County. We are always looking to make sure that our rights are protected. And I'm a little confused at what the separation would be between these bills, the conservation wells and the wells that are under previous legislation 1293. And so we also are opposed to any metering of any well. And we're just curious what the impact will be on those wells already in place. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you. BPS, anyone else on the phones?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
All right, that'll take us to neutral testimony on behalf of Senate Bill 258, either here in Carson City or down in Las Vegas. BPS, do we have anyone on the phones who'd like to testify in neutral on Senate Bill 258?
If you would like to testify in neutral for SB 258, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. There are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
All right, Senator, would you like to make any closing remarks?
Chair Pazina, members of the committee, thank you for hearing Senate Bill 258. I got a lot of warnings about a bill on water, and I appreciate everyone's concerns for and against, and I'd like to try to talk to some of the folks in opposition. I've been able to talk to Mr. Walker, but the other folks in opposition, I don't believe I've been able to have meetings with, so I'd like to try to address their concerns and see if there's common ground. I appreciate you hearing the bill.
Thank you very much, Senator. All right, with that, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 258 and move into our final order of business, public comments. As a reminder, public comment is limited to 2 minutes per person, but please do feel free to submit any additional written comments to the secretary and they'll be added to the record. Is there anyone here in here in Carson City or in Las Vegas who'd like to make public comment? All right, BPS, anyone on the phone who'd like to make public comment?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
All right, with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.